maintaining the theater and the
Right.
just what Tom just talked about, the staff and the backstage crew and.
But the Children's Theatre is some cost recovery, though. Those kids also take acting lessons and singing lessons, and all of those are fee-based programs.
Okay.
And we have the Friends of the Children's Theatre.
Yeah.
By the way, we have 5 Friends groups in community services that support. They're tremendous in what they do for the department. But the Friends of the Children's Theatre is, when that topic came up, should we charge pay to play, the Friends group stepped up and said, we will pay.
Right.
We will raise money and pay, and they pay,
Yeah.
I want to say $50,000 or something annually to support the theater.
There's no appetite for charging children's theater any more than we do. I know there isn't.
I just want to add something. When Rob mentioned the Friends groups, it reminded me of another thing where during the audit, there's not a clear way to identify where those subsidies from the Friends groups are coming in to offset program costs, and the new ERP system could potentially help with that, so you could really get a full sense not just of what the cost of a program is, what revenues are being generated through fees, what costs the city's paying, because you really have 3 revenue sources: fees, general fund, and those Friends groups, and being able to link those all together would give a much better picture of what's going on.
So are those Friends amounts showing up in here? Not at all?
No, we couldn't identify how they
So if the
specifically
theater's,
into all of them.
at 30%, but the Friends money is on top of that?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah, it would be good to see that. But
And some of it is really considerable. I mean, it's remarkable what the Friends of the Junior Museum have been able to do, where they've just now hit their $25 million goal of rebuilding.
Astonishing.
Yeah, amazing residents and non-residents that just love the program and willing to put that much into it and spend money and ask for money to support a city program like that. And the Palo Arts Center Foundation is the same way. I mean, they raised over $4 million to renovate, as you know, is the Palo Arts Center, which would never, and they raise $100,000 or more a year to support programs, which is also not represented here.
that's pretty big.
Yeah.
And they at least, the Art Center has a paid developer. I don't know about TheaterWorks, whether they do or not.
Each of the not every Friends group, but most have some type of staff to help
Somebody
with development.
who tracks that development work.
Particularly the ones that have a membership program, like the Junior Museum and Zoo. They have a robust membership program. The Art Center does as well. The Recreation Foundation, not so much, and the Friends of Palo Parks. They're really project-based. Raise money for a specific park or playground.
You know, what would be fun to know, Tom, is how many Friends groups there are, because I have a feeling there are probably 20 or 25.
We have many partners that support us, like Save the Bay and Actera, that do a variety of things. But there's 5 foundations that exist, nonprofits, just to raise money for the city of Palo Alto in a specific program area.
Can you name them?
Yeah, there's the Friends of the Children's Theatre, the Friends of the Junior Museum and Zoo, the Friends of Palo Alto Parks, the Palo Alto Art Foundation, and the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation. And they're the... And there are different departments. There is a Friends of the Library, also raise a lot of money and sell used books and other things, and generating a couple $100,000 for the libraries. Yeah.
And TheaterWorks has something called their Inner Circle, where they raise money as well.
Yeah.
Those are expenses we don't see.
We don't see this.
Sorry.
All right, any other questions for now?
Not at the moment.
All right, Tom, do you have a couple more?
I would just, I guess, move that we accept the audit,
Second.
forward it to
Mind if
council.
I ask a couple questions first?
Oh, sure, sorry.
No worries.
If you just hold down the numbers.
I'll try to be quick because I know we all want to get out of here. It's Valentine's Day, and we did have quite a meeting last night. So just a few questions. First, the goals on, so just stepping back a little bit, right, to think about the goals for a second. On packet page 6, ensuring financial stability. I mean, obviously that's something I think we want to be in favor of. Customers paying appropriate share of the costs, and city programs are subsidized in accordance with the city's cost recovery policy. I think these are generally pretty good goals, but I just want to make sure we are all thinking about that in the context of this. And I don't really have a question there, but in that context, looking at a couple of other things here, On packet page 10 at the top, listing the objective of the audit, and kind of getting towards what the impact of the audit will be. Does this audit obligate CSD to seek more cost recovery? Or does it just offer a recommendation, and then it's totally up to the director or the city manager to make that determination?
It doesn't direct them to seek more cost recovery. What it does is it makes a recommendation to ensure that now that the city has a citywide policy, that their cost recovery practices align with the city policy, and that they look at the costs, the actual costs, which were hard for us to really identify on a class-by-class basis. And I don't think it's necessary that they identify it class by class, but they do need to know on a program level basis at least what it's costing them so that they can set their fees appropriately. So the goal is really, and the recommendation is really make sure that what they charge aligns with the city policy. But before they can necessarily do that, that city policy needs to be revisited to allow for market level recovery when that's appropriate.
Okay, and looking at packet page 20, on item C, where it talks about, says, require CSD to annually assess whether cost recovery levels achieved targets and address obstacles and opportunities to meet targets. I actually wonder if there are times where council will actually want to be one of those obstacles, right? And so, really my question here is, knowing that there may be times where, and I really do, let me just step back a second and say, I think this audit is really useful because I think it does help get us towards better understanding and help the department have a better understanding and coordination and alignment with the city policies. But then when it comes time to make a determination or make a decision about how much to charge for a program, obviously council may have a sense about a particular program where we want to charge more, or maybe even more likely where we want to charge less than the director or the city manager may recommend, because we see an equity issue or we see some need in the community, a benefit to the community of having a lower fee for, especially for residents. And so I just wanted to check, as a reminder for all of us, what the process is for when council wants to say, we actually want to see a lower fee. That would come to us as that would be a separate agenda item, right? Whether it's at policy services or at full council, talking about the fee schedule itself separately from the audit of the fee schedule.
I would agree. Let Rob speak for a second, but I also want to say, when we wrote that, we didn't envision council as being the type of obstacle that we were thinking.
It's what got me
we
to
were
think about the
thinking more
question.
that once there was some sort of agreement and there was something that was unexpected that caused them not to be able to meet that they would look at that and say, why can't we meet this target? Kind of like a performance measure, what causes you not to meet that measure?
Right, no, sure.
Okay.
I was taking it a bit poetically, you could say, taking liberties. But when council wants to weigh in on the fees themselves, that will come back to us. Will that come to P&S, or will that come to, does that come to full council? Or does that come to finance?
It goes to finance
That's right.
committee. I think it's a good question, though, Chair Boldlock. I mean, we're currently preparing the 18 budget, and I see Kylie over there, and we talk at length about fees and revenues and what is reasonable, and what does the policy say, and we know that costs are going up, and so to keep up with even today's cost recovery level means fees need to go up to maintain that. And what does that mean? Does that create a barrier for participation or not? And so there's some real trade-offs that we have to consider. But yeah, you're right. It comes to the finance committee and then the full council as part of the budget process and the muni fee schedule.
Right, and I think that that's important for us to just to remember that staff, you guys will do your best to implement the policy, but then ultimately, I know you guys know that this council is never afraid to weigh in if we want to tweak something in the details. And my last question is just as far as implementing the recommendations. Actually, I want to think about a few different departments here. CSD, ASD, I see represented here, and the City Attorney's Office and IT are all named in the recommendations. And I was just wondering if we have a sense of what the administrative burden of implementing this audit might be, even in a qualified rather than or a qualitative rather than quantitative sense. I don't know if any of those departments want to weigh in, or if there's any thinking on the administrative burden that staff would like to share with us, just so we have a sense of what the implementation would look like.
Yeah, I can begin with, it's a good question. I don't think it's a huge administrative burden. I think most of it falls to CSD to manage. The cost recovery policy that was drafted and approved in 2007 is not very different than the one that the council approved as the citywide policy. So there's some tweaks we need to make. The template tools and consistency, we've already begun working on that. We're going to be working closely with Office of Management, Budget, and ASD to make sure that's going to work. So I don't think that, first of all, we agree with all the recommendations, and I don't think it's a big burden. And I would add, and I was going to say this at the beginning, but I'll just say it now, that thanks to the auditor for the work that they did. I mean, as you know, the department does a lot. Community services does a great deal all across the community, and it's very diverse. And we don't always get the time to do sort of deep dives into fee setting and other things. So it's actually very helpful to have a report like this, and we think this will help us do our work better. So
Great. Well, that's it for my questions.
Just one last thing. What are your most
Don't forget your mic.
What are the most popular programs? I frequently hear parents say, I just never can get my kids into those summer programs, or I can't get into the after-school whatever it is, or we waited in line, used to be for preschool family and things like that. So that's school, not you. But what do you, if you were going to expand what you're doing, where would you do it?
The two that come to mind that we see wait lists consistently is the Junior Museum Zoo and the Palo Art Center. And I think largely testament to the staff that run those programs, Karen Kinzel and John Aiken are the two managers. But they're unique facilities, and they're constantly reinventing the program, and it's a combination of fun but also sort of science and education, which just people love, and they just do a really nice job with it. And it's they're unique facilities, so people want to be in zoo camp, and there's only one zoo, and so there's only so much, so that gets filled up immediately. So those are the two that that come to mind are the really, really popular. Within the recreation division, we have more opportunity to add kids and participants, because a lot of the programs are in community centers and on athletic fields where we can have 30 or 40, even more. Foothills Park, we have 55 kids at every camp. And we have several camps, so we have over 150 children. And they do fill up, but there's just a lot of space, whereas zoo camp, it's 12 to 15 kids, and that's all we can really accommodate to make sure the experience is a quality one. So.
Yeah, no, it's an enormous and varied department, and very visible in the community.
Thank you.
On
On that, well, I think that as somebody was making a motion, who wanted to go ahead and make it?
Tom did, and I seconded it.
So, Tom, let's just make it official.
Just move we accept the audit and forward it to council.
Amen?
And second by Councilmember Ness?
Yes.
Any discussion? All right.
Yep,
All in
thanks,
favor of the
guys.
motion? Aye.
Aye?
All right.
Good job.
Looks like it passes unanimously. Thank you all.
Okay, go forth and raise the fees.
All right, and I think that our city auditor is going to remain here for item number 2, which we'll now move on to. Thank you, everybody who came for item number 1. Let's move on to item 2, Auditor's Office Quarterly Report as of December 31st, 2016. So again, I'll turn it over to our city auditor to give us any presentation on this.
Thank you. So as you know, we do a quarterly report, 4 of them a year, obviously, so that we can just update the council on what we're doing, progress we're making on our audits. And so this represents the second quarter of the fiscal year 17, for the period October through December 2016. highlights during the year. First one is that I was notified in December that I'm receiving a national award from the Association of Local Government Accountants for excellence in government and leadership. I don't have that award in hand yet, but it's on its way. And the award is to recognize one state, local, or tribal public professional annually who over the course of their public career has exemplified excellence, promoted excellence in government, outstanding leadership, high ethical standards, and innovative management procedures. So I was very happy to be notified that I'm getting that. Thank you. And then we also completed and presented to the Finance Committee the city's financial statements and reports. We actually present them on behalf of Ms. Ciastini and O'Connell, who's the external financial auditor. Those were presented to the Finance Committee in November, and then we published the fee schedule audit, which we just presented to you. So getting into the audits that are in progress, these are the status as of December 31st, so some of these have progressed beyond that at this point. The first one is continuous monitoring audit. We call it procure to pay, which is really accounts payable, where we're looking at whether data analytics and using some sort of continuous monitoring of those data analytics can help the city to identify potential duplicate payments to vendors or duplicate vendor records. So we're moving along with that. That is in the reporting phase and is pretty close to being done. It will be done much sooner than June, but because of scheduling, it won't be presented to Policy and Services until June. I'm expecting that it will be done. We have February on here, but most likely it will be March. And then I'm going to skip the next one since we just presented that. We have the utilities water billing accuracy audit, and that one is to determine whether utilities customers have been accurately billed for their water services. That one is in progress, and the auditor working on that is drafting the report now. That is scheduled for presentation to Policies and Services in April 2017 this year. We're on track, but depending on how much conversation there is back and forth regarding the audit findings, it could potentially get delayed till June. I'm not scheduling anything for May Policy and Services from the auditor's office because I won't be in town on that date. So if we miss April, we'll be going in June. The next one is our continuous monitoring of overtime, where we're looking at whether or not if departments have more details about the when and the why they use overtime, that they could be able to manage it more effectively. And that one is in the reporting phase also and is scheduled to be presented to Policy and Services in June. We're also in the process of wrapping up an audit of sustainable purchases, which is looking at the purchasing practices to determine on a citywide basis how well the city complies with applicable green purchasing requirements in our city policies. Those include the environmental preferred purchasing policy, the extended producer policy, the recycled paper policy, and those types of things. And that one is very close to being finished and should be on time for the April Policy and Services Committee. We're also looking at the Hydromax cross-bore contract. That was work that was a contract to do sewer line inspection work and report back to the city what it was finding as far as cross-bores, gas lines crossing through the sewer lines, and looking at whether or not the city got the required information from that contract, which the contractor wasn't able to finish that work under the existing, the contract that was originally in place. And so the city manager's office asked us to actually look at that to see before they implement execute another contract to finish the work, whether or not they got the data they were supposed to, and whether or not the city allocated an appropriate level of contractor oversight. As of December, that audit was in the field work phase. It's actually now in the reporting phase. The report is being drafted now, and we expect to present that one to Policy and Services in June also. So a non-audit service that we are doing is looking at, we've been providing some advisory services to the Department of Information and Technology as it's developing the requirements for the new enterprise resource management system. So I have one auditor who is doing that work. She's participating in all of the technical and strategic planning meetings that IT is holding with the departments, and we've had one written communication with the department to kind of clarify what our role is and what our role isn't in this process. One of the other things that she did was did some research on where government IT projects, ERP systems in particular, what the biggest risks are for successfully implementing such a system. And we summarized those and gave that to the department also. So right now they're in the process of having a change in the project manager. I'm not quite sure how that's going to affect the work, but the project manager we'd been working with just went out on maternity leave, so there's a new one in place. And then the National Citizen Survey, as you know, we presented that and the annual performance report at the council retreat on January 28th. As of December 31st, we were still compiling all of the information and analyzing the results of the Citizen Survey, but those are both complete now. So we also do sales tax monitoring work, and we have a consultant who assists us in that work, where we look at business records for Palo Alto to identify where a business may have underreported or potentially misallocated their sales or use tax to another jurisdiction. Really looking at trends. If we see, a business had sales tax for a period of time, then all of a sudden there's none or there's a big drop, it's kind of an indicator for us to look and see, was there potential underreporting or misallocation. Underreportings typically happen more with new businesses that haven't got their procedures in place yet. The misallocations are usually errors on the part of the business and how they reported in that particular period. So for the second quarter, we received $12,120 in additional sales tax. $3,400 of that was from my office's efforts, and $8,700 was from the consultant's efforts. Year to date, for the first two quarters, we've received an additional $274,000. And right now there's 62, what they call them short forms. It's the form that gets filed with the State Board of Equalization for them to initiate the work to look at the sales tax and determine if there really was a misallocation. So there's 62 of those forms sitting with the state on behalf of Palo Alto right now. 20 of those are from our office and 42 are from the consultant. And then we also do some routine advisory roles. We participate in the Utilities Risk Oversight Committee, the Information Security Steering Committee, and the Information Technology Governance Review Board, which really looks more at when new projects are coming up. We provide advice if we see something from an audit perspective that we might want to provide some input on. So moving on to the status of audit recommendations. A couple of years ago, I believe it was 2014, when I came here.
Yeah, why don't we, if there are any questions about that section, go for it.
Yeah, just about that.
The sales tax?
Right now I'm on number 2, of which you just finished. And maybe there's no connection here, but the issue that arose with the school district last year regarding the amount that they anticipated coming from Stanford and what actually came was pretty startling. So does this have anything to do with that in particular? Were you monitoring that, or was that something they were monitoring?
That was what they monitor.
It wasn't anything to do with us.
Right, and so we get sales tax from the hospital construction project because it was a very large project. We made arrangements to be able to get the sales tax for materials purchased for that purpose allocated directly to the city. And so I actually have some numbers here. Over the course, that's supposed to be through.
That was a good negotiation.
Yes, over the course of, it happened before I came here, so I can't take credit for it. But over the course of the time that the construction's been going on, and it went up, and then it's going to gradually go down. Beginning 2011, it was about $10,000. Last year, it was $884,000, almost $885,000. So far, we've received about $2 million in sales tax revenue as a result of that effort.
And do we just put that into the general fund, or is it set aside?
It goes into the general fund. It's just general sales tax money.
Good, thanks.
Do we do that for all construction projects in Palo Alto?
No, we typically would only do it if it's a very large construction project. We had talked with ASD and Tommy Fehrenbach before he left about doing being more aware of some of those projects, but until someone is more actively in that role in the city manager's office, we probably won't know about those. I won't know about those projects, but I think once that position is filled, we'll get more have more communication about how we might go about identifying some of those projects.
Yeah, just a thought on that is maybe to connect with actually Peter Paranajad's development center as a point along the way.
Good idea. They got a great award last night.
Okay, so, excuse me, moving on to the status of audit recommendations. So, in 2014, when I came here and I wanted to sort of modernize our ordinance and some other things in the office, one of the things that came up was the status of audit recommendations. So my office used to gather information from departments once a year, and we'd present the status of the outstanding recommendations to the council. And then the council wanted the city manager to start reporting directly. We didn't get a good process in place. I think we have one now that will start moving these along. So I've been working with Jim on a new process, and my office is going to start initiating the process, but they will still be city manager reports, and instead of coming just once a year, they will start coming every 6 months like they're supposed to. But my office is going to establish the schedule and send out the notifications to keep departments on track. Because as you'll see here, all of these, most of them were past due as of December 31st. There's another one that as of tonight is past due, and another one that as of the next Policy and Services Committee meeting will be past due. So we're initiating this, and you should start seeing these come through. I would guess probably beginning with the April, May, June Policy and Services Committee meetings. Also, one that has been, two that have been of particular concern were the inventory management and utility meters audits. And my office met with ASD and utilities 2 weeks ago to talk about how to move those two sets of audit recommendations forward. And I think we have a common understanding now of what the expectation is. And so I think that those ones will be coming forward pretty quickly too.
Through you, Corey, November, December, we had long conversations about issues with sufficient staff to meet these goals. Does
Yes.
that continue?
So you're talking about my staff where one was out ill. That particular auditor was out ill again for a different reason. She's been back to work, but I know that she's still not completely well, but she is at work right now, so.
So you're back to full staff at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I have a couple questions, but I wanted to turn to others. Any other questions on this item?
I do have the hotline to talk
Oh,
about
I'm sorry.
still. Do you want?
Sorry. No, please
Yeah.
go ahead. I'll let you finish your report. My
Yeah,
apologies.
that's just the last part. So as you know, we administered the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. In 2000, to date, in 2007, fiscal year 2017, we've received 7 complaints. 5 of them are closed. 2 of them were expected to be resolved in January, so they should be closed as of the next reporting period. Only 1 of those was substantiated. The others have not been substantiated. And that does conclude my presentation.
Tom or Lydia, do you have any questions? All right. I'm sorry.
I will go ahead.
Oh, yes, so please go ahead. Go for it.
Or you can go ahead.
No,
Either way.
after you, Tom, please.
So I actually had a couple maybe suggestions on the report, because I think, oftentimes we have similar questions. On the open items, it might be good to know which of these would be fixed kind of actively versus some of those that are waiting for the new ERP system. Because we see a total of 75 open items and no fixes in the last quarter. But I think a lot of those items are just waiting, like for the new ERP system.
I think it's a smaller number waiting for the new ERP system, a much smaller number than just open recommendations. But I have had a lot of conversation with the departments and ASD in particular about if a recommendation is so old that it really was supposed to be a change in SAP, that we will close it out now and reopen it as we do some of our ERP planning audits.
I mean, I think this is the second quarter with no changes, and so.
It's more than that.
Okay. So again, I'd like to understand why, if some of these open things are just never going to be fixed, we might want to take them off or understand that.
Right, and I've been pretty clear with departments that I'm open to that. If we need to revisit a recommendation for it being overburdensome because it's dependent on the new ERP system, whatever reason, that we can discuss that, and I'm open to revisiting that. And we actually did do that with some of the older ones that we were able to close out already.
Okay. And then it might have answered the question, it wasn't really a question, but the chart here on implemented recommendations.
Yes.
It might be good to show like the previous 3 quarters plus the current quarter versus Q4 2017.
Right. You're talking about the number implemented?
Yeah.
So you actually have that there. It's just been 0, 0, 0.
But again,
Because
it might be good to show kind of rolling past history.
Yeah, it's been no progress for a period of time, so.
Yeah. And then, you're talking about your award and stuff, but you're going to thought last year you did a lot, I don't know if your staff did too, of rotations to other cities. I forget what you call that, where you go.
The peer review.
Peer reviews. You might just want to have a section where you list those.
So we haven't had anyone go on one recently, but when we do put it in our activity highlights.
And then on the sales tax, a couple of things there. Again, the cost recovery seems to have dropped off a lot in the last year. I think 2015, the sales tax, I'm jumping around a little bit. But the sales tax cost recovery, again, my feeling is has been pretty low the last several quarters.
So,
And again, it might be good just to get
right.
maybe like an annual chart that you could show us.
just like this.
Yeah.
Just like that. I had someone do this today because that question has come up a few times
it
recently.
comes up a lot,
So I said, can you go back and create this? And so fiscal year 16 was low, but the previous 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it was over 100,000. This year we had one really high recovery that we weren't anticipating. It was about $240,000 from way back in 2007, and it was a misallocation that went to a city down south, and really a huge misallocation, and should have been distributed throughout the state. And Palo Alto's share of that was $240,000. And so our consultant consultant worked through a pretty significant appeal process with the State Board of Equalization to recover that money on behalf of its clients. But if we took that out, we'd be at about 30,000. About 30,000 for this year,
Right. So
year to
I
date.
know it's kind of lumpy and unpredictable, but it just feels lower, and there's a backlog there, but.
Yeah, and that backlog has been growing. I went back and looked at the numbers for the last 4 quarters. A year ago at this time, the backlog was 52, and now we're at 62. And so it has grown in between there. It was 52 in December last year, or a year ago, 56 in March, 63 in June, 65 in September, and 62. So the state has told us that they've been understaffed, and I think that's why those are taking so long for them to get through their review to determine if there is a misallocation.
Okay. And then the last one, I was just curious. I looked at this link here in the quarterly sales tax reports.
Yes.
And the last one up on the web was June of 2016. So I think we published at least one more since then, right?
So, yes, so they're always delayed a little bit. Those actually come from the consultant, and then we do a little summary on the top, but they missed a quarter and had to catch up. So there's June 16th, I think,
So
is the most
Q3,
recent one,
Q4.
right? So we should be getting the September one fairly quickly. But there's always a lag in those because of the timing of the state giving the consultant being able to get the information from the state and putting it together
But it
their
sounds
report.
like, yeah, I just wanted you to be aware. It sounds like there's one missing, but it sounds like you're going to catch up. So, okay, thank you.
Lydia, any questions or comments?
So first I want to say congratulations on your award.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Procure to pay. So if it did happen that we had duplicate payments to vendors, can we get that back?
Yes. And the department does identify some on their own. We identified some, and they identified some. Right now, our biggest concern is really with duplicate vendor files, because that creates an opportunity for someone, or a lot of unused vendor files. They haven't been used for many years. That creates a lot of opportunity for bad things to happen. And as we move into the new ERP system, that's one of the things we'll be recommending, pull over only active vendor files and have a process for weeding out vendor files, or archiving them, I would say, archiving vendor records that aren't being used.
So there's a lot of cleaning up to do.
Yes.
Second question was about the abuse hotline.
Yes.
That's for employees. Staff,
Correct.
right?
It's an internal
internal
hotline.
hotline.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You might say a little more about the hotline, just because it has, in the past, been an interesting topic.
Yes. So, as you can see, we don't get a lot of complaints, but one of the concerns I've had is that a lot of the complaints we do receive, for example, if you look at 2015, you say, 2016, say, oh, wow, people are starting to use the hotline. 9 of those complaints were basically different versions of the same complaint. And when you read them, they sounded like they were coming from the same person. They're anonymous, but the writing style, you kind of tell, it sounds like it's coming from the same person. And so I'm in the process of working on the protocols, revisiting the protocols, and we're supposed to come back to Policy and Services in March to look at what can we do to make the hotline a more effective tool, and not have it be where someone is calling in to complain because they don't like a decision their manager made, when it's really not a fraud, waste, or abuse issue. Possibly doing some publication of what, I hesitate to call it marketing because you don't want to be soliciting calls unless they're real fraud, waste, and abuse calls, but really putting some information out to employees about what the hotline is and what it isn't. And there's a lot of good examples out in the public arena for what works and what doesn't work. So I'm working on that now and expect to come back in March with a report.
Any other questions, Liz? Okay, I've actually got one question, and it kind of ties into the next meeting, or item on our agenda, which is future meetings and agendas, and that is two of the items that you are talking about bringing to Policy and Services Committee.
Yes.
I would actually suggest should probably go to Finance, but I wanted to discuss it while you're still here. Those are the water billing accuracy audit and also the Hydromax cross-border contract. And my reason being that generally, Finance Committee should handle utilities-related items. And so I just wanted to raise the possibility of those two going to the Finance Committee.
Can I address that?
Yeah, so that's phrasing, that's why I'm bringing it up, so I wanted to open that up.
So when I worked on updating our ordinance back in 2014, one of the issues that came up was how does the office decide what goes to Policy and Services and what goes to Finance? And it was pretty much random. It was like, oh, it's time for Finance to get one. Oh, Policy and Services has that. And it didn't. There wasn't some real clear criteria for how they were deciding what went to which committee. And then Policy and Services recommended and Council adopted a decision that all audits would go to Policy and Services, and Policy and Services would act as the audit committee. So it doesn't specifically use the term audit committee in the ordinance, but that was the reasoning behind it, and it is a best practice from an audit perspective to have an audit committee where one committee hears the reports. So if we wanted to do that, we did make a change when we did the Animal Services audit, because initially Finance Committee had asked us to do some work I put it on our audit plan, but the Finance Committee was very interested, was asking the City Manager's Office to look at the financial situation in Animal Services. So we made I think Policies and Services made a recommendation to move that to Finance, and we did that. But on a routine basis, it was really intended to be that Policy and Services would serve as the audit committee.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know if my colleagues have any thoughts on that, or whether we'd want to revisit that or just accept that as an explanation and move forward.
I have a quick comment. I mean, we've certainly done utilities in the past, the gas meter audit, the inventory audit. And so I'm interested in that, and I'm also very interested in the Hydromax audit, so.
And let me be clear, I'm very interested in hearing them. I just didn't want to take something away
I think
from
it makes
Finance
sense
if it's
to have
appropriate.
the auditor interface with the
I appreciate that feedback, but.
They're two different functions. You just have me turn it off. There are times when we've looked at audits and then said, this probably should go to Finance as well, because they will look at it differently. Mm-hmm. So we've seen that happen in the past as well. So I think I understand just what you're saying. This is the audit committee.
Yes.
And then I think sometimes at the end of that, you might say, this probably needs to have at least a flyby with them.
We actually had that
Finance.
discussion with the cable funds audit, and the advice from the city attorney's office, I don't know if Terrence wants to step in on this at all, I was talking with Molly, was that it's really best to keep it with one committee and then move to council, and rather than having, since I've been here, I haven't gone from one committee to another. We had that discussion with the cable audit, but then we ended up not doing that.
Any comments from?
No further comment. I think that adequately describes Molly's direction.
Yeah, I think one thing to add just from the city manager's perspective, and I know we've talked to Harriet about this, and certainly I think Harriet and Jim could finalize it, but I think where Jim's coming from is that he wants to make sure that both committees have an adequate workload, and that one doesn't have too many items in one year, and that one committee doesn't have that many items in the same year. And so I don't think it's something that necessarily we need to resolve this year, and but I do think that it's a topic that may come up at your next retreat, to look at the workload of both committees, and even the discussion of the committee structures in itself and as a whole. And so I think that's where some of the discussion is coming from. But again, certainly Harriet and Jim would have to kind of finalize
What do
that.
other cities do?
I don't know off the top of my head.
From an audit perspective,
Yeah,
I've always only reported to one committee.
good to know.
Tom?
Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe we close this item and talk about future agendas, since we seem to be hitting kind of work.
So,
well, that-
but I
I
need a
appreciate
motion.
that.
I need a motion.
In that direction,
Yep.
right?
So I'll open to a motion.
So moved.
All right. Do you want to clarify the motion, or does the city clerk need us to clarify the motion?
Right now, I have it to accept the auditor's office quarterly report as of December 31st, 2016.
Do we have a second? Motion by Nis and second by Koo. All right. Any more discussion?
I have a 5 minutes.
Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much, Harriet, for 2 excellent agenda items. And let's move on quickly before we adjourn to future meetings and agendas. I've done some communicating with the, well, actually, does staff want to say anything here?
Yeah, the
before I
first thing,
say
if we could do, if there is a little time crunch, City Clerk Beth Miner sent you guys a doodle poll today for March meeting. So is there a way we can determine the date tonight? That would be really
Why don't
helpful
we do
for
it right
us.
now?
I couldn't make it, I just responded.
Yeah, so the dates
any of them?
that she had proposed are Wednesday, March 22nd, Tuesday, March 28th, or Wednesday, March 29th.
And then we have a start time for either 6 or 7 on those
Yeah,
nights.
I think I'm available for all of them, so
Hang on, while I look.
what were those dates again?
The 22nd, 28th, and 29th of March.
Starting either at 6 or 7?
6 or 7, depending
Yeah.
on your schedules.
And usually, how long does it take?
29.
Hour and a half?
2 hours to, sometimes it goes to 3, depending on the
Yeah,
items.
you'd want to block 3 hours on your calendar.
hours?
Just to be safe.
3 hours?
So I could do
I'd
the
recommend blocking
22nd
that
if we
on
start at 7.
Why? Did I miss something?
Just to play safe.
I can't do it, it says here I'm giving a speech on the 29th, which I'd certainly forgotten about, but the 28th is okay and the 22nd is okay. I think it's the
Tom.
22nd.
So Lydia
So
and
instead,
Tom.
I could do the 22nd if we start at 7.
And Lydia, how does the 22nd at 7 PM look for you?
I have to give up my drumming lessons.
You what?
My drumming lessons. I guess I can do it.
You shouldn't have to give up stuff if we're moving stuff around. What works better for you?
The 28 works for me, but it's another thing that I have to give up. So either way, I'm giving up something.
Giving up something, right? Yeah.
So
Which would you rather give up? I can do the 28th too, though.
And Tom, could you do the 28th or just the 22nd for you?
Yeah, I gotta check my other schedule. Yeah, I think I can do the 28th as well.
Could you do the 28th at 6? That's always so much
Yeah,
easier. Oh,
I think we might have a date.
So are you,
okay, is that one you can give up more
Thank
easily
you.
than drumming?
Yeah.
yeah, so let's go, so it sounds like we're going to go with the 28th at 6 PM for our next meeting.
Okay, that is really helpful for us to know now and
Great.
get
Thanks.
the reports queued up.
Thanks for raising that.
So just along those lines, I've got a document up on the screens. Apologize I didn't print any out, but right now we're looking to bring the hotlines protocol discussion and then the update to the fiber and wireless projects that night.
That's a big one.
Yeah, so you can see April's looking at the utilities water rate and billing audit, sustainable purchases, and then potentially the taxi cab license ordinances.
is that an update, or what is that?
That is the focused around the ride share, like Uber
Yeah.
stuff. I think it's a continuation and potentially a new ordinance from what I understand. But I just want to caution you that we seem to be having a rolling schedule here, and so this is just very tentative. I'm pretty certain we are set for March in the sense of Harriet's ready to bring the hotline protocols, and utilities and IT are ready to present on the fiber. So we're pretty certain on those two items for March. I think the other ones are just tentative.
Could we throw out some ideas too?
Yeah, well, I was going to suggest a couple that, we've been talking about with staff, that I've discussed with the city manager and with Cash, and then see if you guys had any additional ones. Do you mind if I kick it off?
Sure.
So just before you kick it off, Chair, so I can certainly take the notes of the items, but just to be, clear that, we don't have authority to schedule those, right? So that would either be a direction from the city manager to add these items to the agenda, and/or the full council has to direct any of these items to be added to the agenda. But I can certainly take the notes, share them with Jim, and the chair can do that with the mayor as well.
Right. So there are a few things that I thought there's a good chance they might come that are not currently listed here, but I think there's a high likelihood that they'll be raised possibly in this next calendar year, or in the current calendar year. One is the issue, or any rule changes around marijuana growing in the city, because we do have an ordinance that is scheduled to sunset at the end of the year, and we may want to establish some ongoing regulations. So that's one that might come to this committee. Also, campaign finance rules for Palo Alto. That there's a colleague's memo currently under construction. It hasn't been submitted yet, but it's expected soon. Also, another one that's a possibility for this committee, another colleague's memo that's under construction is, or undergoing work is regarding TCE and other, potentially other groundwater contamination. And then a couple of things relating to maybe possible follow-ups to the resolution that the city passed in December around an inclusive community, relating to women's rights, and also potentially relating to immigrant rights. I know that as a resolution as a whole is going to Human Relations Commission, but I think there is a chance that those are a couple of items that might be directed by council back to this committee. So I just wanted us to, to be thinking about that and put that out there for the conversation. And again, these are ones we've talked about a little bit with staff as well. So any others from other committee members? Tom?
Yeah. So I'd be interested, and I don't know if it should come here to the full council, but kind of an update on the Magical Bridge and that program. They're trying to franchise and expand nationally. A Cumberly Master Plan update might come to P&S first. Town halls, update on kind of the town hall schedule. Jet noise, I think, has come to this before. And
take that up in this committee, right?
Well, it started here, and I think now is the time for council to get active, so it'd be good for us maybe to get an update. And
I have followed through on the request that you made as well.
Okay. And kind of related to that, again, maybe it needs to go to council first, but the airport operating plan. And then the last one was, I think, surveillance came to us, and I think staff pulled it back for more work, so I think it would just come back to us again.
That's the data collection and privacy policy.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of coming tentatively for May 9th.
Okay. Good. That was it.
Any others?
Could I just ask one question, because I know the Magical Bridge folks have been around and probably talked to all of us that they have found so far. So when you requested that, what in particular did you want for information? What goal, sort of what process or goal did you have?
I think it would be interesting to get an update from them, and then maybe hear, if there's things that they could use from community services or not. We have kind of the showcase pilot playground for them. I think it would be good just to understand what they're doing and how we could support them. They seem to have a pretty good base of donors and things, but I think it's a Palo-owned park. So I think we should be aware of kind of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I know they've kind of really done full court press on PR though, which is
Yep.
interesting because that hadn't, I've known about it for a long time, but I haven't found, they haven't come into the community quite with the same intent
Right.
previously. So that's why I was curious.
Lydia, do you have any other items? Okay. And so for each of those, both the ones that I mentioned and the ones that Tom mentioned, I'm open to whether they, it'll be determined later, whether that's going to come to this committee or go to full council or just be worked on at the staff level. But I think there's a good chance any of those could come before us, and we can continue to talk about how to bring those forward and schedule them. Great.
Yeah, I'll certainly update Ed and Jim on your requests and the ideas.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, just a
and
reminder
Harriet, yeah.
that you should have these 8 audit status reports coming at some time within the next few months, too.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Well, concluding that, let's adjourn the meeting and enjoy the rest of Valentine's Day. Thank you.